afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another instructive Propagandacast. Lehr with me, your host, Imperial Dane. Master of Instruction, Lord of Education. Off here with the Propagandacast, Lehr discussing how to, decide what is a proper engagement. Because, that's one of the sort of more trickier things, knowing when to fight and knowing when to just get the devil out of there. And in particular, it's also something that can vary quite greatly from faction to faction because they have sort of different goals and how they want to win a fight. But for example, with the Soviets, a lot of people just complain your country's going to go, but that's not necessarily because you have to fight and win every single engagement with the country. Sometimes, you can just have your country fight a single engagement, just not actually beat them. They're just sort of tying down infantry. And that, for example, can also be a big thing. Just tying down enemy troops from the infantry squad, setting up for maybe another one flanking it. But in general, again, depending sort of even your force composition, like how you want to fight every engagement, which fights you want to fight, can sort of vary quite vastly. So in many cases you want to consider, well, what am I actually trying to achieve here? Does this actually make sense that I'm fighting now? For example, Romeo always said, don't fight a fight you're not winning anything from, and that's actually quite important. Some players, particularly less experienced players, or hell, if I'm playing poorly, I'll just fight every engagement. Obviously I'll lose a lot and I'll get upset because I'm not winning, but the reality is I kept fighting for example a lot of bad engagements, and you'll also see that I think the sort of less experienced players, they'll just fight every engagement even if that engagement does not necessarily make sense for them. In that regard, sometimes the best trick is actually just to tie down troops. That can just be fighting engagement. Again, you're doing it specifically to hold down enemy troops. So just say you have a unit in a building, hold up several infantry squads. You're actually doing something good because then you can free up troops to do more damage elsewhere. And that's also just as important with doing damage elsewhere. Also, furthermore, just for example, ignoring enemy forces just to hit the points, force them to come to you is also a very good way. Just trying to then create an engagement that favors you, and that's also very important. For example, here just set up machine gun there, and that I didn't anticipate machine gun there. It's a bit risky, but at the same time, it forced engagement that's much more in its favor to an extent. So in that regard, understanding when and where you want to fight and how you can fight is always good. And also consider, well, do you actually have a chance of fighting this engagement? If the answer is no, and it doesn't serve your purpose, the best case or situation in this case is just to retreat. Also, just having an idea there of the opponent, because they can also up to a lot of things like harassment and raids and whatnot. But really, just whenever an engagement happens, you have to ask yourself, what am I achieving from this engagement? Will this one actually help me towards winning? Will this help me out in any way? Can I actually fight this fight sensibly? Because if the answer is no, and your goal is not to tie down a more expensive units, just more expensive units for a long time, you can do so, then you're better off just falling back and retreating. There's nothing wrong in retreating, just falling back, though. Maybe trying to bait them into something else, because it's much more pointless just having units fight out and not actually win an engagement. And of course, also, it just highlights the other part, which is sometimes the best move again, as George highlights, is just to move around, ignore, infiltrate, overwhelm that way. And that's also a lot of people tend to be less keen on, because again they just tend to think very linearly. Again, similarly, just how you grab points, some people just go very linear, but you can actually jump around, take points here and then just connect them up. And similarly, harassment, it's also good to sometimes just ignore all the smaller strategic points, hit the big points, and then sort of connect up. Similarly, again, sometimes what you want to do is again not just engage head on, but sort of circle around, hit them from other angles, flanking. And this regard, knowing when to engage, all that also involves, well, knowing how to flank. So there's a lot more there to it, most people consider, at least sort of less experienced players consider. In that regard, knowing when to fight, when does the fight actually benefit you in one way or the other is, quite critical. Again, you have to consider, do you actually have a chance of winning this fight just destroying their units, at least forcing retreat? And even then, you also have to ask yourself, well, am I actually going to benefit from this? Am I even going to benefit from when this engagement is going to not serve me any purpose? So there are a lot of factors you sort of have to consider. Of course, a lot of this is just going to come, with experience at time punching. You just sort of more naturally just pick up on, this is a good engagement, this is a bad engagement. But the key element to an extent is also just thinking less in linear terms, because I think a lot of people, particularly less experienced players, just tend to think the game in much more linear terms. They get bogged down, they get frustrated, because they always just keep thinking, I have to win this fight. But at the same time, the question is, do you really have to win this fight? Are you gaining anything from winning that fight, or are you just throwing away manpower? And that's always the sort of critical question. You have to ask yourself again, how much manpower am I putting into this? How much damage can I realistically expect to do? And how much can you realistically expect to lose from doing this? And more further, does this help me towards my goal? And in this case, your goal should always be either destroying an opponent's infantry unit or tank or whatever, gaining resources like fuel points or gaining victory points. Like those should be sort of your three main priorities. Can I destroy a unit? Can I gain access to more resources and deny resources from my opponent, or can I gain access to victory points? I mean, I think those sort of, you have to at least sort of begin a little sort of, big goals, like, and then ask yourself, in any of these engagements, are any of these fights really achieving that? And again, if you get bogged down, you should always then consider just moving elsewhere, because again, there's nothing wrong in just deciding this fight is not panning out, and don't feed more resources into it, because again, some players will just keep feeding in resources into a fight that isn't paying off for them. And that's usually also sort of beginner mistake. Hell, it's a mistake a lot of generals made during World War I and World War II. Despite the fight not panning out, they just keep feeding in resources. So, it is, something to learn from history as well. So, always, do that if possible. Try to think more about the fight you're doing. Try to always ask yourself, if possible, am I gaining any from this fight? Again, am I moving towards larger goals for my fight? And just try and start out with these sort of basic rules, and hopefully sort of just can sort of build up to sort of more advanced things in your head, and more advanced execution, so just more advanced engagement. But overall, try to work towards thinking less linear. Just think you have to do it specifically like this, this, and this, and think there's only one route. In reality, there's usually many routes, many paths you can take, and you don't always have to just secure everything in a neat order. You can always just jump around a bit, and you're trying to surprise your opponent. So hopefully this one's been helpful to you, a bit useful. It's a bit more of a sort of, again, vague topic in some ways. It's less concrete, it's more theoretical, it's a lot more just idea based, and obviously again just resolves a lot more of my thoughts on the subject matter. But it's I thought I'd try get across to people, because again I do think it's something to help out, and it's also something whenever I do perform poorly for something coming to, which does happen from time to time for whatever reason, I'm feeling tired of something. Usually in hindsight I can always tell to a large extent it comes down to I just keep really just fighting terrible fights that do not benefit me in any way. And when I'm hitting also doing well, in many cases just realize nothing about it. It's also because I'm able to just consistently just deduce this fight is working out for me. This is not. I'll just pull back here, and instead I'll reinforce this fight that's going well. I'll do something else entirely. So try and keep that in mind, because it's one of those, honestly, I think, more advanced skills in the game. So if you can sort of, even as you're just beginning in this game, just begin working your way towards it, I think you'll sort of slowly find yourself doing a lot better at the game. So hopefully this has been of use to you. Hopefully this has been educational. If you subscribe, like, share, comment on it. And, consider supporting all of my work here by donating or pledging on Patreon. Links in the video description. This is Imperial Lane saying cheers, and see you all for another video in the near future. Bye.